So when we talk about Pranamaya Kosha, the first thing comes in the mind is the prana. And what we understand with the prana is the breath. But it's again a myth. The Pranamaya Kosha is all about the prana, but the prana is not what we breathe in. It's not about oxygen, and it's not about the energy, what we understand. The prana literally means the vital force. Now, that vital force is existent in the living and non-living. Now, that's a surprising part. Non-living means anything which is jad, which is not moving. So whether it's moving or non-moving, so which is non-living, also has prana. So prana is literally the energy, the vital force, which is the basis of existence. If you all know that everything, including living and non-living, regardless, everything in the universe is the particle. Particle is the atom. So molecules to atom. An atom again goes to proton, neutron, and electron. Now, that energy which binds them together, and with energy which binds all the atom together and make anything which we make, whether it's living or non-living, that is prana. So again, if we talk about prana, we are not talking about the prana only in the human existence. We're talking about the prana in the universe. And that is what creates the whole universe. That prana is Mahaprana, universal prana, let's say. On individual level, when it comes to create the existence of being, that is the individual prana. So in our reference, in the reference of human beings, when we talk about the Pranamaya Kosha is what it makes the prana. Now, again, there are 5 major pranas and minor pranas, and then there are nadis, there is chakra. So the whole Pranamaya Kosha, when we talk about in the human existence, we're not just talking about the prana and breath alone again, not just the energy or the vital force. We are also talking about chakras, because that's also the integral part of Pranamaya Kosha. We're talking about nadis, 72,000 nadi according to Hatha Yoga Pradipika. But then if you go to the Shiv Puran or other texts, there are 350,000 nadis. So again, there are different description of the major nadis through which the prana flows, vital force flow. Not just, again, breathe in and out. I'm talking about prana. Now that prana through the nadis and through the chakras, when it flows, where does it go? It has different functions. So there are 5 main pranas we're going to talk about in Pranamaya Kosha. But also the important factor here is also that Pranamaya Kosha is the interlinking connection between body and the mind. So that is the one which binds them together or connects them together. So it's an intermediate force which equally drives the body, equally drives the mind. So a lot of time you must have heard from me, myself, when I talk about that it's, if you want to change anything in the body or mind, the prana is the best place, because changes here will change in the body and in the mind. So that is the vital force connecting all these 2 koshas, integral part. We also did talk about in the very first week when we did talk about diseases. So psychosomatic element, Adija Vyadi, comes in the body through Pranamaya Kosha. So the first thing when there is an agitation or stress or worry, or the root cause of the stress coming from the mind, it enters in the body through the prana. That's what the Yoga Vasisht says. Now, in this text, that's what we understand, that when prana is disturbed, the disturbance in the body starts to happen. The disease becomes later stages, and then disorder is a further later stages. Then body is not able to cope anymore and becomes a disorder. But all that could be reversed if it is not yet settled in the body, in the Annamaya Kosha. So through the prana, again, we can reverse this cycle, not just with prana, but of course with Annamaya and Manomaya, but then prana again reverse the whole cycle. And that's where the reversal of psychosomatic elements has come into the play. So we'll talk about a little bit on that as well when I talk about Pranamaya Kosha today, and also the process to expand and work with the prana. So again, today when we're going to start working on prana, I would like all of you to work with me, because after the session, if we forget, we don't put it into the practice, then this whole concept goes very nice session, but I don't remember what was talked about and what to be done. So let's practice today with me and tell me how you feel and what's all happening. I'm assuming other than one I know, nobody else is eating while sitting in the session. So if you're not eating right now, we can do this. And if you're eating, don't worry, you can even practice later on. So there's no restriction. Now, Pranamaya Kosha, I would just like you to focus, simply closing your eyes. Just observing your breath in and out. No need to control, no need to focus. Just observe. Just feel your breath in and out. As you start to feel the breath in and out, you feel the flow. It's a natural flow. Now, I would like you to expand your awareness and feel throughout your body, where all you feel this flow. At some body parts, you may feel the flow very strong. At some point, you may not feel strong enough, but still feel that there is a movement, there is a flow. Slowly come back and open your eyes. If you're not comfortable talking and sharing on the session, I would like you to write it down if anywhere you have felt this flow strong enough, other than the breath, anywhere else in the body you felt the flow. Now that flow could be blood circulation, that flow you must have felt just like a movement. You don't know what it is, but did you feel the flow? Tingling everywhere. Sometimes it does feel like a tingling. Anyone else has felt the flow of the vital force or the force, some flow? Nowhere else?
Just
So
yeah. Just like breathing in the chest and stomach.
Yes, chest and stomach, very nice. So 3 pranas has come into the picture. I'll talk to more. So the 5 main prana, which we focus on, which do most of the function on the bodily level, we understand they are mainly responsible. There are upapranas as well, but I won't go into further details. So the breath in and out, what you felt is the called mukhya prana. So that is also called prana, but we call it mukhya prana, the main prana. That is what we felt through the breathing in and out. The other one, which we again feel on, and this is what we feel in and out, is on the chest region, because the breathing goes on the lungs, from nostril to lungs. Then comes the very first, we call it apana vayu, apana prana, which is on the lower, below the navel region. This is responsible for excretion. This is also responsible for the sexual secretions as well. So again, menstrual cycle, ejaculation, excretion, bladder, intestine, all of that, the clearing out from the body, the force which requires to push out of the body, that is what the apana vayu does. Next comes the samana vayu. The saman is the middle part, so the stomach area. This is where the saman vayu works primarily, and which does help in the digestion, assimilation, and the flow send it throughout the body. So that primarily work on the middle part. Then we have pran vayu, and then we have udan vayu. So udan vayu work from here to upwards. So all that is udan vayu. Usually when we say, when we throw up, the vomiting comes. So every force that comes upward, that is the udan vayu. And then we have throughout the body, on the skin, the circulation, just like somebody just shared, tingling throughout the body, that is the vyana vayu. So that is throughout the body, it's circulating through as a skin sensations. These are the main 5 pranas, and they have their own functions. So when primarily we say from the pranic perspective, when we see the disorders or diseases into the certain area of the body, we primarily see where the pranic flow might be blocked. Now, these prana doesn't flow freely. They flow through the nadis. Nadis are not like veins and arteries, what we see in the body of anatomy. Nadis are again very subtle channels. They have no biological existence. We don't see them through cutting our veins and arteries, not like that. The nadis are the subtle channels through which the prana flows. And there are again 3 main nadis. I'm sure this is all you know, but I'm just having to collect them together and put it together. So the 3 main nadis, as I said, 72,000 described in Hatha Yoga Pradipika, but the Shiv Puran goes to 350,000. And there is another text which says 300,000 nadis. So again, the numbers may vary, defined by different texts. From the expert's point of view, what mainly they define, but they all might be right. These are the subtle channel which allow the prana to flow for certain area into the certain purpose and the function. But the 3 main nadis which do manage the major functions of the pranas and our body, Annamaya and Manomaya both together, that is Ida, Pingla and Sushumna. These 3 are important to remember. So Ida is the moon nari, or we say sometime Chandra nari. The Pingla is the Surya Nari, we call it the sun one. And then the middle one, the one which gives the stability, is the Sushumna. Now, important part to remember, if you want meditation, if you want focus on the mind, if you want balancing, all of that is a function of Sushumna, the middle one. When that's balanced, and I'll tell you when that gets balanced, you cannot balance that. Ira is what is when you want Ira, as they say, if you remember anything else or not, but it is Chandrama, it is moon. But the nature is cold, cool. So it's a relaxation response, what we ideally say. The other one is the Surya, hot, active. So this is what we say, sympathetic nervous response. So the active responses, energy, drive, function, everything that is on that part. Again, the physical energy is the Pingla, and the mental energy is Ira, moon. So moon is the mind and the sun is the body. Now, these 2 functions primarily happens when these 2 nadis. Now, these 2 nadis function according to the movement of the sun. That's an amazing circadian rhythm, which I often talk about, biological brain and biological clock in our brain. You see that Ira and Pingla, they keep switching throughout the day. And when that happens, this description also defined in Swara Yoga. Swara Yoga is completely focused on how left and right breath and how this breath goes with the sun, which means circadian rhythm. Now, all of that together, you do not have to control that because it's completely in alliance with the sun movement, basically the day and night movement. Now, when this also gets disturbed, we see the body changing, the disorders taking place, the dysfunction starts to take place. So what we also sometimes do is we switch those movements accordingly, whatever outcome we need. So, for example, at times when we see a lot of fatigue, now again, this is not generalized, I'm just giving an example. So, don't just try listening this example, but this is just for understanding. If we are talking about fatigue, and if it's a chronic fatigue, doesn't go away, always tired, we assume at very first instant that it is the hyperactive Chandranari, or so then activation of Surya is required energy that's coming from Surya, which is the physical energy we need. So we do start to activate that, but again, with the precaution that how that proportion goes. But however, we will discuss that in more details at the end of the session. But this is what Naris does. Now, when these two Naris are balanced, there are certain time in the whole day, specifically in the early morning and in the evening, when sun and moon both are on the same place. So the time of sunrise, just before the time of sunrise, when sun is rising and moon is setting, and the evening, the same time when the sun is setting and moon is rising, that's where we say the perfect harmony in the world outside, in the universe. This is where this is happening in the body as well. And when that happens, the Sushumna opens. Now that Sushumna opens automatically when these two are balanced. So you don't control, you don't hold. You need to balance both to open the Sushumna Nari. We do that with the Nari Shodhan also, but it's not as strong when the Sushumna starts to flow, where it happens, it's its own natural timings. That happens naturally. We do activate that, but for that, there is our precautions. We'll talk about that. Naris has to be cleaned, purified, no toxins in the Naris or in the body, in the mind. So again, you have to purify Annamaya and Manomaya if you want Naris to be purified from the toxins. So this is prerequisites, but again, preparing yourself for any sorts of prana or the movement. There are three phases again. The very first one is be aware. Just be observant, be aware, and feel the flow of prana to understand first. And then we work on the expansion. So if you know your natural flow, you know how to expand, to what extent you need to expand. And then comes the control part. We do pranayam very often after asanas. I usually don't recommend that. The reason behind that, if you're not aware of your natural flow and you're not aware, it's not enough expanded, it's not enough worked on, then the controlling prana is going to put unnecessary pressure on both ends, on body and mind, especially on nadis. So if I say, just again, a very common generalized example to say, if there is a channel which has a flow of water or air, whatever, and that channel is blocked from one end, or it's blocked just in the middle for some reason, but you keep pushing it. And then through that, like pranayam, like Bhasrika, Kapalbhati, or holding our breath, when we do this, a lot forceful pressure we are increasing, but this is blocked. It's not until it is open, it is not going to flow any further. There are possibilities that it's going to burst, or it's going to put unnecessary pressure, it's going to make the whole pressure to the surrounding nadis as well. This is exactly what happens if we are not ready for pranayam. We are putting unnecessary pressure on nadis, on Pranamaya Kosha, but this side effect doesn't stay in Pranamaya Kosha. It does extend to Annamaya and Manomaya both. So very common example that sometimes we do see when the pranayam is not done correctly, we do see the spike in hypertension. We do see the spike in palpitation. We also see the spike in anxiety, panic, or sometimes it does trigger acute anxiety attacks as well. However, if you have been doing yoga for a while, the body manages this to a certain extent, you may not feel acute, but somebody who is new to it, they also may feel the acute attacks, which is a common side effect. All of these side effects cannot be rectified by anything else. It has to be rectified by these yoga practices and a yoga therapist alone. Because this is not at the physical level. There is no primary cause or reason except malpractice of the yoga or pranayam. So we need to be very cautious whether you get benefit or not, at least not to get side effects. So just don't jump onto any practices without knowing what is flow of your prana, what is the disorder we are working with. And again, before starting pranayam or before working on Pranamaya Kosha, you cannot work on Pranamaya Kosha without working enough on Annamaya Kosha. Purification of the mind, purification of the body, because that only purifies or cleanses the nadis. Once the nadis are clean, the flow of prana will be natural and spontaneous. You also would be surprised to know that certain texts actually just work on Pranamaya Kosha to treat the diseases. They don't even do asanas or meditation or any aushadhis. They say, clarify your Pranamaya Kosha, diseases will be gone away. And it does work marvelously wonderful, almost like a miracle. But somebody has to be the one who is working on it, that has to be very expert tackling the prana. Again, prana is the vital force I'm talking about. So all this vital force, its flow and the life, connection with the life, and it does not just remains in the Pranamaya Kosha. As I said, it does influence the Annamaya's function, it does influence the Manomaya function, and both of these actually directly influence Pranamaya Kosha. So you cannot work without working these two together. This is where in the last session, I did talk about coordination between your body, breath, and mind is the most important key into the yoga practice. Not just what you practice and walk, exercise, go on treadmill, or do talk session with somebody. You'll still feel light, you'll still feel good. But when it's yoga, yoga is the union of these three together. Yoga is joining yourself with the self also. But primarily joining this union of all these three together in everything, anything in you do in the practice of yoga. So asanas you must not just do the physical posture, you must coordinate the movement with the breath and mind with the flow of prana. You'll see the tremendous outcome of a simple asana also. So let's come back on the Pranamaya Kosha. So nadis. Now comes the chakras. I won't take much details on the chakra. The reason is again primarily very much talked into Tantra, in Kundalini Yoga. However, in the yoga therapy, we do not work on chakras. We believe that if prana and nadis are worked on, if they work in balance and harmony, then chakra opens up on its own. Kundalini is not the primary focus in the yoga therapy. It is not even a focus at all in Raja Yoga. It is not a primary focus of Hatha Yoga also. Only the Kundalini Yoga, and that is also comes in the part of Tantra, not Yoga Shastra. You know a sixth system of Indian philosophy, then you know the Yoga Shastra is one of the system of philosophy which joins the material world to the spiritual world. So it's a transition. But here we do not focus on opening up the chakras because that has no relevance. Chakra opens up on its own when the prana is balanced, when nadis are pure, clean and purified, the flow of prana is clear, then chakra starts to open. When enlightenment starts to happen, that's where the Kundalini Jagran happens, we say. But again, one of the malpractice I often hear that humne Kundalini jagai. You're still struggling with the disorders. You still have your body is still struggling with the health condition, your prana, vital forces on the different level, when we talk about 5 pranas, they are not really harmonized, they're not really balanced yet. How is it possible to open the nari? And that's also Sushumna nari. How is it possible that it's open? Even if somebody did that from their own experience or expertise, it's not natural, it's not spontaneous, it will not sustain. It's like one of those things when you do the weight loss with all of that products. The moment you leave the product, you're back on the full-fledged huge size, much bigger than in your original size. It's a side effect of those products when they bring it quickly down and then quickly flares up again. It's one of those things that it will come back to much worse state than before. And it is not very uncommon what we hear after that. So if you even think about doing the chakra and kundalini yoga, I would suggest to think twice, consider all the alternative options. Are you really ready for this? And why do you want to do this? Because that's, again, not a primary focus in Yoga Shastra. That is the focus. It is bound to happen. If I start eating healthy, if I start taking care of myself, I am bound to feel good. I'm bound to feel nice. So it's just one of those things that when you start doing these things, chakras will open up. The Kundalini is a time, its own space, and its own pace. It is bound to happen. So let's focus on enlightening, re-energizing our body, mind, redirecting the vital force to the spiritual enlightenment, to our growth, rather than restricting it to what outcome I need. What are you ready for? So when we talk about Pranamaya Kosha, just to remember again in a nutshell, purification is important. That comes from the body. So when you are doing any breath work, when you are doing pranayam, and when you are working on holding your breath in any phase of pranayam, make sure your bladder is clear, your intestine is clear, you have cleared the toxins from surface and inside. Your mind is clear. When I say mind is clear, that means if you are angry, hugely angry, you have an acute phase of stress, not to do any of these practices because mind is not clear. There is a lot of going on. What here you can do is, there are practices which we can still do, but not in any of these acute phases when there is a lot going on and a lot is holding inside. Not to do prana movement and pranayam. So the best ideal time is when the toxins are clear from the body and also your body is ready with some of the movements from the Annamaya Kosha, your mind is clear, then you work on prana. That will give the maximum benefit. However, there are practices which we do use for the acute situation, but they are not pranayam. We modify according what impact do we need. We'll discuss that on question and answer session. Anything, I would like to take a little pause just to make sure everybody is following. And if you're okay with my speed, you would like me to hold on, redefine anything, or have any question, do not hesitate to write in the chat box. Meanwhile, if you don't want to discuss on the live session.
I don't know how to put in a chat box. I don't know that.
You can talk, Kamlesh, don't worry.
Yeah, well, I've written few questions.
Yes.
Which is bothering. What is 5 pranas, first of all?
It's a mukhya pran vayu, which we do the breathing, that is called prana. The apan, which is downward movement of the prana, which is, as I said, excretion. Whatever happens, that happens because of apana vayu. Saman vayu is the middle part. It flows in the middle part of the body. Here the pran vayu is, and then udan is the upward movement, and the vyan is throughout the body. The circulation it regulates. So that's mainly 5 pranas.
So is it one is apan vayu, the other one is
Saman vayu,
saman vayu, then
pran
udan
vayu,
Then Pranvayu. Okay, then
Yeah. Udan Vayu
Danvayu, yeah.
and the Vyan Vayu.
Vyan. Okay, now I have to
So,
understand the meaning of all these.
so Dr. Neha, following that question then, how do we know which prana is out of balance and how do we balance the 5 pranas?
Okay, so what symptoms we are having, we are dealing with, that's the first question. Any therapist would ask the history and also symptoms. So when we hear the symptoms and the history, we do realize how did it start? Everything starts from the root cause. It didn't happen in one day. So the root cause is important to understand what could be the dysfunction in the prana if we are talking about. That is also the root cause. And what first symptoms you started to have, whether some people had acid reflux, for example, in at the start, some had constipation, some had crampings. Again, what sort of symptoms first arise when you started to develop this condition? That is, and then also what is the condition and symptoms right now? We do not define dysfunction of the prana with the disorders in the medical dictionary. So if you say, I have diabetes, well, that's not enough for me to know what dysfunction of the prana. Primarily, I may say it's probably Saman Vayu because pancreas and dysfunction of that part is the Saman Vayu. But it could be probably the stress. It could be probably the Udan Vayu. So I got to understand properly the symptoms you're struggling with. And when it started to develop, what symptoms were arising. So both are important to know. We do have recordings, so don't worry, you won't miss it, and we will share it on the group. Now, when we talk about emotions, and especially emotions like strong emotion, negative emotions, which we don't like to have, like anger, and also sadness, or it could be anything. When we are dealing with the emotional burns out, one of those things is also important to know that what is the triggering factor. Now, again, the prana doesn't flow nicely or forcefully. It is triggered by something. If there is an imbalance anywhere, it is definitely triggered by something. It doesn't happen. Nature doesn't have imbalance on its own. COVID didn't happen on its own. It was triggered, isn't it? Something unnatural took place in some place, which was not supposed to happen. That was a unnatural process, something which going against the nature, whether inside the nature or outside. Anger doesn't happen on its own. Something against your nature if you are pushed or you're pulled. So again, this is one of those things doesn't happen on its own. You are going against your nature is also the same thing. When that happens, the imbalance is bound to take place. That imbalance do appear in different forms. So in Pranamaya Kosha, also you will see you have breathlessness. Anger doesn't come just as an anger. You will see you're struggling to breathe until you burst out, you say something, you're still breathless. Your palpitation go up. Your heart rate is high, your blood pressure is high, and all of that, which is on the spike, is all the pranas getting involved, not just one. So there are some underactive prana and hyperactive prana. Both are involved. So disorder is underactivation and hyperactivation. Now, when we are talking about all of that to manage, first thing to manage is coming back to your natural self. We want to manage the COVID, we got to stop unnatural eating and passing on to others. So we had to put lockdown in place, isn't it? Still, we got to do the precautions. Still, we have to manage spreading it. So again, the same thing in the body and mind. First, you have to put yourself under lockdown. Lockdown doesn't mean that you don't go do anything. You need to reframe all the factors which is triggering it, which is responsible for it. And then the body and mind will reinstate everything.
Oh, so it is mental then. So it's not things like doing the right amount of pranayams or different types of pranayams and asanas to balance it. It is all mental then.
It is not just mental and not just physical. It is both together. It is
But
both together.
how would
Pranayam
how would
does.
we know? How
Hmm?
can we know that what we need? We are not experts unless
You
somebody.
only know who knows. Who knows me better than me? The first thing. Now, what really I want to know,
Mhm.
what is that I want to know, is the
No, like
question.
diagnose. Say if I suffer with diabetes for a long, long time, how would I know why it triggered, when it happened, and what do I need to do now to control it
You
or
tell
go
me,
after?
how did it trigger? So going back on diabetes, any of our condition, this is also a discussion in the very first week we all did. How do we know? So going back on the days when you were on this diagnosis, and go not on the day of diagnosis, I will repeat, going back 2 years back, what all was happening in your life? I'm sure it's just not eating and not exercising happen. I'm sure there has been life changes, major life events in your life in previous 2 years. Whether it's stress, whether it's grief, whether it's bereavement, whether it's trauma, whether it's a major life changes, relocation, immigration, migration. It could be anything and everything which put you under tremendous change. And then body and mind, you don't do healthy eating when we are going through these changes. We don't take care of our stress levels, and we do not manage our exercise. A sedentary lifestyle is also comes with that. So all of that becomes a combining factor for the diabetes to arise, or hypertension. So again, it's not one factor. This is where these conditions are categorized into psychosomatic elements. The psyche is important character here. That triggers the prana and that triggered the body. And then body is struggling already too much with the day-to-day function, and on top of it, the psyche is constantly pushing it, and prana is already imbalanced. This is, I'm talking in the yoga, what we are talking about, yoga therapy. Then it fails to manage everything and collapse. So the disorders start to settle down. We all know what might have happened. It's just going back in the time. Do we go back in the time? Let me give you an example. I I started to develop fibromyalgia last year. And then last year I started to have a strong symptoms of fibromyalgia spectrum. I didn't go to GP because I knew what I was developing, and I knew very well I did where all I messed up. Going back into my 3 years time period, I have neglected a lot of a lot of healthy lifestyles, but also I was working on COVID-19, and we worked day and night on our toes without taking breaks because mind was constantly on a roll with the virus. Now, working in that high demanding situation, I'm not just saying high stressful, we all were stressed in lockdown. A high demanding situation that we got to deliver a solution. We got to find something, constantly evolving situation on our toes. This is very much normal in the corporate world, or any job you're, or even in the family situation. Sometimes you're constantly on your toes. If that's what the situation is, you're bound to happen in 3 years time, 2 years time, symptoms will start to come up in the body because you are not looking after yourself. You're not managing the stress enough, stress of the mind, not enough, because then now that's pushing in the body. So you call it psychosomatic elements or psychosomatic medicine part, or you call it yoga therapy. Both are talking the same thing. I'm talking the same thing from the both angles.
Yeah, that's so
It is
true.
mind, but mind cannot alone do it. It requires body to cooperate as well. So both are joining hands, whether in recovery or in disorder, both are required.
So, Dr. Neha, then, when you say reframe all the trigger factors, do you reframe them as positive self-talk statements then? How do you reframe them?
No, that won't work. Now, if you ask me, the affirmations, positive talk, or me doing a wonderful talks will not help. The reason behind, your mind is not foolish. It knows that I have a stress for some reason. We'll talk about Manumaya Kosha and Vijnanamaya, and we'll talk about the reversal, how to reverse or work with the mind. But just for, how do we work on the reversal end or managing this part, this will not work. If you want to manage, the first key is Annamaya Kosha. This is where the whole program I started. Start with Annamaya Kosha. Start taking the burden off from your body. And how do we do that? Eating, not just what you're eating, but then how you're digesting. Also, what time, how you better assimilate. Digestion will happen, but then it is still in the blood, roaming around, not taken by the cells, and then toxins are developing. Body is not enough managing, enough storage or throwing it out. So it's still in the blood. So we have high cholesterol, we have high blood sugar, we have all of that high levels coming up in the blood. Where it's coming from? I'm not eating too much. I'm not consuming too much. That also a potential factor which we don't consider. We keep dumping it. So the Annamaya Kosha, the first thing is assimilation. How do we increase our assimilation? Remove toxin first. So Shatkarma you do, or you do look after with the brain-gut axis. That also you can remove the toxins. That also you can trigger the appetite, the fire, digestive, metabolism. When I say digestive fire or I say metabolism, both are saying the same principle. Work on that. So the assimilation starts to happen. So the things in the blood floating around starts to disappear. Body gets little bit relief. The first rule is that. The second is the prana. Help modulate the prana, the vital force, I'm talking, not just breathing, vital force to modulate. So it helps for body to do its own function. It helps mind not to push any more stress in the body. And then comes the mind. Because if you start working on the mind will take little time. Now, you start from body, it's easy to work on. You start from the mind, that's the difficult part. So by the time you already start to see changes in the mind.
So how are we going to modulate this prana then? You said it's not pranayam. So how are we going to do it?
Start with Annamaya Kosha. As I said the very first week, start with Annamaya Kosha. You start to remove the toxins. You start to balance your daily cycle. And if you have missed that part, I can share I do share recordings in the playlist now. So you have everything there. So you start with Annamaya Kosha. And then you also, the prana, the balancing the prana is the first key. You work on the awareness part. So let's say, if you have anything, somebody just mentioned anger, let's say, I will say stress, anger, any factor which has arrived, just instantly hold your breath, work on your breath. Today's meditation was holding that breath. Yeah. If you even do that part, you are managing it, not pushing it into the body. So use the breath wisely to manage the symptoms in the body or symptoms in the mind. You can modulate that. You can modulate prana to modulate body and mind both. As simple as that. And how do we do that? Just what we did this morning. Kickstart. That's the first thing.
I didn't do
then
that.
You will know. Then you will know. I keep saying awareness. Why do we have to be aware of? So we know what's changing. So we all know our triggering, like I have migraine, for instance. I know my triggering factor. I know how I'm getting headache. I know I'm going to get the full attack. Now, what do I do here? I can't sit and watch and can't take a pill and sleep. I want to manage it. I want to prevent it. So when I have those triggering factors and when I know that it is coming, or if I'm aware of the first changes I feel before I get the attack, then I am aware. When I'm aware, I can modulate that part. If you're not aware, you cannot modulate. Just focus on the breath and see what and how it's pattern, natural patterns. If that natural patterns changes, you will know. Something is changing. You bring back the change again. You reverse those changes again. So whatever is changing in your mind and body, you may not know at first, but you know the changes start to happen. You feel tired. You don't feel good. You feel not yourself. We know that, right? We know something is not right. And if that continues to happen, we go to GP and say, well, I'm not feeling good. But at least try with these simple practice and say whether we can reinstate.
Yes, because sometimes, yeah, when I look at my prana, when I do Anulom Vilom, I notice one of the nostrils or even both sometimes is very hot air coming out. And I'm thinking, why is such hot air coming out, right? Now, once when that happened, I had an infection I developed, but normally I don't know why I get the hot air. So if I get hot air, should I be opening up the Chandra, the Chandra Nadi and doing that way? I don't know.
Oh, no. Chandra, hot air doesn't always mean the sun or the Surya Nari. It not always the naris or the pranas responsible. Sometimes it could be the metabolism, it could be the breaking down of the elements in the body, it could be the toxins that also creating the pressure. So when you're working on pranayam, as I said, if the toxins are still in the body, let's say ama in Ayurveda, as it says, the toxins, they're still in the body. You're creating a lot of pressure on that. And then also you feel like heat generating unnecessary. That doesn't feel normal. That doesn't feel natural. So it could be any of those factors we don't know what to rule out. And even a good therapist might not be able to rule out all these factors. So just to be on safer side, that's where we say, clear your bladder, intestine, clear your toxins, take a shower and then sit down, because then blood circulation is moving correctly and normally. And then you do the pranayam. So when you do that way, you may not feel those changes that strong enough. But still, if, as you said, body is struggling with something like infection, we say fever comes when the body actually is fighting with infection. But there are early stages that, when it enters, the response starts. We start to feel the changes. So all of these early phases, early signs is what we can pick up if we are aware of. So the prana is the best tool to be aware of changes in the body or in the mind, and we can revert that very easily.
So how to make sure you clean? See, you said cleaner intestine and clear mind. Mind is never clear. There's always something going around in your mind, And how do you make sure
Mind should not be clear and
intestines
empty.
Sorry?
When we have dementia, we don't have memory, we don't have thought, we don't know where we are. That's not what we want. That's
No.
not clearance of the mind. Clear mind is that you're thinking clear, you're happy, you know what you're doing. Mind is never clear of thoughts. There are
Yeah,
always thoughts.
thoughts.
Thoughts are harmless. Say, if I have 100 thoughts right now going on, why do people ask so many questions? Why they don't turn on the cameras? All the time I have something going on in my head while I'm sitting in the session, but these are harmless thoughts. As long as I'm not focusing, acting, and talking about it. When do we talk? We act upon the thoughts and we are engaged with it. Now, suddenly, when I first came, I said, can we turn on the cameras? 2 cameras turned on. Now, my thought was still there, why people are not turning camera? They're not comfortable. But then, there are 2 ways. I can engage with the thoughts, and that becomes a trouble. And if I say, people don't value my time, they don't even turn on the camera. Now, suddenly the emotion changing. Yeah, I'm engaging. As long as the thought was in my head and I wasn't engaging and I didn't bother to work on it, nothing happened. Did I say anything after that? Nothing happened. But when we engage, emotions start to change. Then body starts to change. And then I'm angry and I'm upset or I'm furious. It could go to any extent depending how much I'm strongly holding on to that thought. The another is I might get disheartened and say, well, if people are not interested, they didn't turn up till 6 or 5. And something wrong with my session, something wrong which I'm delivering. Now I am going down. First thought when I was engaging, I was going hyper, getting angry. Now I'm going down to say, well, I'm not delivering right. I'm something wrong with me. In both way, I did engage, thinking my own mind into that thought which was coming up, and I acted on. And in first way, with the anger, I became hyper, so my blood pressure will spike. On the other side, I am getting low, depression to what not may arrive there. Constantly engaging this way becomes a disorder in its own. Because then thoughts will not change. Thought will come and go. The moment the senses sees, feel, hear, we do have thoughts. Thoughts will come with all the sense organs receiving information. Mind is just saying, oh, we received this information. That doesn't mean on every information you have to act on. This is where we do put the filters. I don't want to act on.
No, but sometimes when some kind of anger thought come in your mind, or something upsetting comes, somebody upset you, you keep thinking about
It's
it.
fine.
Family
It's
has said
fine.
thing. So
See,
obviously,
what we know with the thought, that it'll constantly come and go. Come and go. So even if the angry thought comes, that's fine. You decide, am I acting upon? Just like right now, an example I gave.
yes,
If you're acting upon, the series is endless. You're acting upon everything with that thought and the consequences of the thoughts as well. But if you decide not to act upon the thought, which is not important for you, we got to put the filter. And that filter, Pranamaya Kosha will put on and will not let it come in the mind and the body, both way.
Dr.
Yes,
Neha,
yes.
hi. I just say, for example, if you somebody said something to you and it really affected you, you tried to talk reason and nothing goes through and it continues and you get really angry, how do you deal with it? Because I'm not, even listening to you, obviously a lot of it is foreign to me, but I don't know. I mean, normally what happens is you should be able to walk away from the situation, right? And calm down or whatever. But I'm not sure from what you are saying, what should one be doing?
Okay, so if you walk away from the situation, my question is, does the mind walk away from it or it continues to
It
think
won't.
about
It
it?
will keep on thinking about it.
Yeah, so the walk away didn't work. The second you said calm down. Does the calm down also happens? When you say, I should calm down. I never could calm down by thinking calming down. I had to do something. And this is me. But most of the time I know that we know we need to calm down, but do we calm down? Does mind calm down?
No.
No. So these two things definitely don't work. Now, what I'm
no, but
saying is,
sometimes that depends on if somebody has upset you, like the lady said before, it's obviously bothering you, but then you keep away, you walk away from that. How to, when other person keep throwing at you,
Yeah,
the same abuse, whatever you can call that.
yes, I
You know,
agree. I
how do you do
agree that you
Mm.
walk away also, the mind will not walk away. You will be living in constant fear when that might also come back again.
Again,
Also,
yes.
whatever he has said, also pinching you inside. Did I
Yes.
really do that? So again, walking away is the best way for the acute management, but actually that didn't help to get away from in the mind. Mind is already hurt. Yourself is already hurt. The thoughts are already there to hurt you enough for a long time now. Now, in that, how do we cope or deal with it is again filtering in the mind. That means that what is your way? Now, again, what I hear, this one word I will say, logic or reason. Now, let's talk about what is logic and reason. It's a function of our left brain. Yeah. The logical part, the reasoning part, all that intelligent work. Sometimes the logic doesn't work. God exists. My logic says there is no proof that God exists. But then there is a feeling part comes, the right. Yeah. And faith, the creativity, the emotions, the art, everything comes. No logic is required for that side of the brain. When no logic is required or no logic is working, it's good enough to sometime activate the other side and make a reason or closure from that side and say, well, I forgive you. Or do whatever you want from that angle. And now if I say left brain and right brain, what am I talking here? Simply, for today's discussion, what am I talking here? Hira and Pingla. Activating your mental energy or your physical energy, logical brain or creative brain. Again, we are talking about the same. So just start to reason and logic, not from the logical end, but start from the creative part. Find something new to create. Why do we always want to find a logic or a scientific grounding? Or why do we not believe in our feelings? Okay, now tell me, just a very simple question to wrap up this discussion. How do we deal is what I'm wrapping up. People throw things on you. Now you tell me with your logic and feeling both. Why do they throw things? Why individual? You consider an individual who did that to you or individuals who did that to you. Take one at a time and tell me what is your logic and your feeling, gut feeling telling you, why did he or she do that? Why do they do that to you? You know the answer. But we are trying to resolve. We don't need to resolve at times because it's not we. There are two people. If other person is not open to resolve, you cannot resolve. But why do we struggle? Why are we coping with it? We don't have to. You got your logic and reason. My logic and reason, if I found, actually, he always had a problem, ego problem with me. He's always make me a competition and happy to let me down. I found my logic. Do I go and reason with him? I know my reasons now. Easy to walk away because now I know what the situation is.
No, that's
So,
what some feel like easy to walk away means, okay, stop talking to them then. Okay, I don't want to keep any relationship with you or friendship.
Even if you find this logic or reason and you find a closure, it won't even bother if you continue to talk because in your mind, you know, they will throw things because they're jealous or they're upset or they have the ego issue, not you. So again, you don't have to physically walk away. You walked away already in your mind. This is Pranamaya Kosha.
Dr. Neha, I
Yes.
had a situation today, just before this session, and I was a bit late getting to it. It was a simple thing, like somebody was sending me a message, right? Telling me this is what we're doing. We're going to be doing from this period to this period. And I think I feel, and perhaps again, I feel that the person in question, who's very close, is supposed to be very close to me, why would they not tell you in advance? It's like, say if it took a simple example, or like booking a holiday. They have booked it, but they didn't tell you beforehand, or didn't say, I'm thinking about doing this, going away for 3 weeks or whatever. And How do you deal with that? Because you try, when you're talking to them, I mean, you get a message and then, I message saying, you could have spoken to me first or, raised it with me first or whatever. And they cannot see any reason. And because they are someone very close to you in the sense, your immediate family, then you feel that at least they owe, it's difficult to say, but owe it to you to tell you in advance, right? If they're going to be away for a month and I'm here on my own or whatever it is, and then obviously you try and reason with them and they keep on saying, there's no need to. I'm an adult. I can make my own decisions, right? How do you deal? And the more they say that to you, you start getting angry. You try reasoning, but your anger comes into it.
Yes.
And then, you say things which you don't really want to say, and it gets out of control. Now, and that affects your breathing, your heartbeat, everything else. And I probably have a really bad evening or a really bad weekend. And how do you deal with something like that?
Okay, as I again repeat myself, none of this is happening without a reason. So there is always a driving force. We do trigger these changes in the mind. So if you go back on our second week, we did talk about Vijnana is the key to deal with it, not the mind, because mind is pushed already. Now, what is the intelligence? Vijnana is not intelligence really. We are still intelligent through our mind. Vijnana is the understanding. Now, what understanding we have here? Understanding not from one side. Right now, most of the time, we see the one side, which is our side, and we are not ready to negotiate, understand the both sides. We might be fully right, but from the other person's perspective, we don't. Mind doesn't see this. Pranamaya Kosha, or the mind, doesn't do this one. We only reason my side is right. But then becomes this understanding part, the Vijnanamaya Kosha. So what you are developing is all the disturbance, agitation, troubles in the Manomaya Kosha. That's what we say Adi. That triggers your pranamaya, which comes into the body, and you have the spike because anger already triggered, blood pressure, everything is bound, is a series now. If you want to revert this cycle or stop this cycle, we got to bring the Vijnana, the understanding, the knowledge part. Acceptance, what we call it, then comes. But then what is the understanding we need to bring in? Even if we are 100% right, what understanding right now we need? Is it worth it to spoil my weekend over this matter? I would take even that part. Say, no, not worth it for me to disturb myself. They are irresponsible. They didn't consider anybody else, probably selfish. Whatever I want to tag, label, just to have this closure that it's not worth it for my weekend to be spoiled. I don't want to spike my blood pressure or heart rate or even my sleep tonight just because they didn't consider or they were irresponsible. Even if I'm 100% right, and I don't want to think about any way different, but is it really worth it for me to go into this roller coaster somebody else pushed me to? Even this much of understanding can stop all this cycle. Now, if I little bit talk about the vrittis, the spiral, which I did discuss first week, second week, the spiral of the mind. You throw one thing, it'll keep creating bigger and bigger. Just throw this thing and say, not worth it of my time, energy, and my health. I'm not going to think about or even consider this. The spiral will get bigger. In a few minutes' time, you'll see your mind is creating another spiral to say, come on, I'm going to watch a movie. So
what is
this is that?
Okay, sorry? you think, okay, you ignore this. This is other person.
You don't ignore that. believe me, if you try avoidance, ignorance, none of this will work, because visibly this thought is already there. If you try to ignore and avoid and disregard, it didn't happen, the mind will push you more harder, because now it wants you to put attention on it. You try that. If you try to avoid, ignore, and say, I'm not going to think about it, that's not going to work. You think about it, you put an understanding on it, and then when your mind is convinced, yes, you give yourself your good valid reason. I don't know what could be your good valid reason. What is best thing you can convince your own self right now? I can convince myself, well, what a selfish. I won't bother now anymore. At least I know they don't bother. Next time I won't bother.
I
Any
think,
reason.
Dr. Neha, the problem with this particular issue, right, the one that I just outlined to you, that it keeps on happening and it keeps on being repeated, right? Like not telling you, and I put it down to communication. All they have to do is tell you in advance before they take the action, like, book the tickets or whatever it may be. I think you get hurt only because the person in question, one, I think you sacrificed your whole life for them, right? And you expect a little consideration.
Understanding
Understanding,
the
right?
Vijnana,
Yeah.
understanding part. Again, I would say, you know the problem, but you only know the solution. So let's focus on solution, and let's focus on what solution you think you want to bring. If this is repeatedly happening, right now, if I again put it what I'm saying, you're focusing on problem. Let's shift that to say what solution I'm going to find. The moment you give what I want to see to the mind, it will expand that part. So now tell your mind, I got to sort this out. What solutions, what options? It will start bring you up that. Right now, we are focusing this happened, that happened. Mind goes on a spiral to keep on finding what all the problems, and it'll give you the historical reasons of the problems. Let's throw the another spiral in the Manomaya Kosha. It'll start to give you the solutions. What programming we do in our mind, that's what it will bring up. So that is, again, we'll continue this discussion on Manomaya Kosha next week. But for now, I would like you to practice either put an understanding and say, I'm not going to spoil any my time, or find your own way of dealing with it, but throw a spiral in the mind to say, what solution? How am I going to deal with it? So what are my options? The moment you readjust the lens of the mind to bring upon, it will start to bring upon. It doesn't work independently. Mind is not independent. You have to give an instruction. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? It will expand that to any horizon. Before I go, and if I'm not sure, so before I go, I'll answer the questions left in the chat box. Right amount of asana to do before we do pranayam. There's no such criteria of what amount of asanas, but enough so that your body is active throughout. So let's say asanas, forward bending, backward, sidewards, so enough blood circulation has started, and you feel balanced enough to sit comfortably. So no aches and pains and everything. So sometimes we do have 15-20 minutes. That's enough to start working on. Again, half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever your time, but making sure that your body feel ready, balanced, relaxed to go into the pranayam. That is, I would say, right amount of asanas. Cleansing the nadis, we cannot cleanse, like if I say cleansing your intestine, I may say do Lagu Shank Prakshalan or the large Shang Prakshalan, or if you say stomach cleansing, I may say Dukunjal. So that's part of Shatkarma I'm talking. But for the Naris, it is important that our body is cleansed throughout, which means you do any cleansing, if you do at all, or at least throw out the toxins every day. So we don't have constipation, we do not have any bladder issues. Any of these issues, if we have, we manage that first. So making sure the toxins are clearing out every day toxins are clearing out. Also, if anything is stored like ama, we do it through the diet and asana. So again, these simple processes makes the nadis clean. So if you're working on prana, make sure that body is not having any toxins. So first thing in the morning, that's clear. Evening time is also very good one, but because by that time, the body already has thrown out the morning process to throw the toxins. Are you able to talk on the proportion of breath to balance the two nadis? Again, there is no proportion as such. So when we say proportion, there is, as I said, natural timing when the sun and moon are together, which is morning when before the sunrise. So we say Brahma Muhurta. So the moon is ready to set and sun is ready to rise. Evening time, the same. That is the natural time when this happens. But in our body, if you're doing some other time and you want the Sushumna to open, when do we want Sushumna to open? When we want the spiritual understanding. We do sit in the pujas. We want the mind to be quiet and body to be relaxed because we are wanting to connect with the almighty spiritual energies. That's where we open the Sushumna. We work on that part. And if you see the puja also, they do the 5 pranas, they do the cleansing. So believing and focusing on the Sushumna to open. If you're doing that, make sure your left nostril, right nostril, both are active together. When they both are active together, that means that both are active and balanced. So the Sushumna is opening. So Nari Shuddhi does that part for you. So when both are equally balanced, this is where the Sushumna opening. Yes, Sushumna opens up. This is what we, again, in the koshas, when we are talking about Naris, when both are balanced, it does open up. But it's also depending whether Naris are clear and it opens up. But yes, Sushumna opens up. Any questions I have missed relating to Naris and Prana?
Yeah, sorry, the proportion of breath to balance the two nadis, like you were telling us to hold the breath for 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and things like that. I thought maybe if there is anything more,
No, for you and me, for anybody, this proportion could be different. So again, there is no proportion universally equal for everybody. So again, the best thing to find out whether you are ready, whether you are balanced already.
And how you make sure you clear your ama? That's quite toxins, isn't it?
Toxins, again, clearing every day from the intestine, from the bladder is one. Taking shower every day. So again, your blood circulation do this job for you. This is where, when we're talking about toxins, I really enjoy and like. In the Yoga Shastra, we have Shatkarma, but even not in Shatkarma, even Yam and Niyam. Ayurveda talks about Dincharya. Yoga talks about Yam and Niyam. These two things actually does clear your ama and toxins every single day. So if you have...
Ama is in a normal language, like it's a sticky, they say
No, ama actually in Ayurveda, they call it in the toxins. If I'm not wrong, you can correct me. But toxins in the English language, normal language, what we say, basically any byproducts with body is creating in the normal functioning and which is not utilized by the body and to be thrown out, but it remains in the body, is the toxins.
Mucus, is it mucus?
Not mucus, it's not necessarily mucus. It could be anything and everything as a molecule, even that stays in the bloodstream. So again, you cannot clear every single one of them, just making sure that first thing in the morning, you get up, we brush our teeth. So we are clearing the toxins in the mouth, which we develop overnight. We are clearing our bladder. So the kidney, whatever it has cleansed throughout the night, we throw that toxins. Intestine, we take showers. So again, everything on the skin and the blood circulation starts. So all of this is a normal everyday practice. Once you do that, we say then pressure on the nadis are already clear. You're ready for asana and pranayam and meditation. That's the sequence we discussed this morning as well. And that's where you make sure that it's clean. If you have constipation, again, make sure so we don't pressurize too much on the saman or apan vayu, just to make sure that until it's clear. So maybe working more on the apan vayu, so the downward movements happen before we do prana and upward movement. So again, just to see if you already know what the discomfort might be, make sure that we normalize that dysfunction. So if it's a dysfunction of, let's say, excretion, constipation, for example, so we need something more to activate the apan vayu, which is the downward movement, and we need to do less of the upward movement. So how do we do downward? More of the lower pelvic work. That's what we do more often. If you have more of aches and pains on this certain part of the body, so we make sure that we do work with the Vyana. So the more of releasing that blockage from that specific part. So again, that also could be with the prana we can work on.
Dr. Neha, can I
Yes.
just ask you a very quick question?
Sure.
Basically on what I was talking about earlier, anger. Is breathing, trying to slow down your breathing or whatever, is that something that would help?
Okay, so as I said, when you are in an acute phase of something, not to do any of these practices just like that, because again, it might pressurize more. So let's say humming, let's start humming. No holding, no breath, but just hum. So humming does is actually calm down the nerves and relaxes your mind. So then the pressure on prana and the body both relieves. Sound could be another one. So which again, you are not putting any pressure, but then sound can relieve this also for you. Sometimes, if you like any songs, sound basically is, if you like something, or just literally sometimes even hibernation, I say, close your eyes and just take a nap maybe, or sometimes it's difficult on those situations, but if you can walk away just with your mind and just shut down that. Sound can do that, humming can do that, even a walk in the clear air can do that. What is that helpful for you is sometimes good to pick up.
Yeah, I know I was using sound healing before, and that used to help.
Yes, sound definitely helps. So I would say rather than holding your breath and working with any of the pranic techniques, whether it's pranayam or breath work, because right now mind is quite on our go.
Edge. Yeah.
So yes, that might put more pressure on mind. It doesn't like. So if I'm hurt anywhere, I don't want to be pushed at that part because I'm already hurt there. So it's just like it's already dealing with a lot, and you are now telling it to do this specific practice. It's like burdening more. So let's relieve that burden by all the method it relieves the burden, and then come back on normalizing breath later.
Okay.
Humming is one practice which works with prana, also work with the mind at the same time, and it doesn't forces anything on any system. Humming could be very harmless at times, or even like simply what we did in Kickstart, I think oo, and chant, humming sound. That 3 chants also can do the wonders. If you're not having this sound therapy or healing, or there be soundtrack, if we don't have, we can do oo, and ma. Simply chant. You can do singing, you can do chanting. Sound will do that for you until you're ready for the breath. Yeah.
I can see the problem this Bhan is having. Like she's saying, you're on your own with the family, it happened. If you think, okay, you break up with the family, then you are very lonely, and they don't ask you
We'll come
properly.
back. We'll come back on each one
Yeah.
of our such logic analysis and understanding part when we do talk about Week-3 Kosha. And I would like each one of us to come back with our own Vijnana, the understanding part, to say, what am I negotiating with? See, we always have pros and cons of everything, but then how do we make the right understanding, which is good for me as a person, as a whole health I'm talking? What is the best way out? My social health, my family health is an integral part. What am I sacrificing? None. But then making all of that together, what's the best way out? That's what the Week-3 Kosha is all about. So we'll come back on that next week to talk about mind more. So let's please practice a little bit of Annamaya and Pranamaya so that we move on Manomaya and you know what we are talking about. If you haven't practiced or have put into practice these two things, then Manomaya is also a good discussion, but not a good practice, not a therapy yet.